There are moments in life when things change so subtly, you don't even notice it happening. But then, in an instant, the realization hits you like a wave crashing over you. And by the time you get your bearings, it's already too late. That's how it felt when she said, "I think we need a week apart." I wish I could say it was a shock. I wish I could say I saw it coming, that I had some inkling that something wasn't right. But that wasn't the case. In fact, I was blindsided. It wasn't like we were fighting all the time. There were no major blow-ups, no yelling matches that would make you think something was about to break. But that was the problem, wasn't it? We had been coasting. For months, maybe even longer, I had been living in this sort of comfortable numbness, just going through the motions of life. And well, she had started pulling away without me noticing. When she suggested the week apart, it sounded reasonable. She said it was about finding ourselves again, or getting back to who we were. It wasn't the first time she had mentioned needing a little space, so at first, I didn't think much of it. She said it was a way for us to breathe and reconnect. I didn't argue, even though a part of me wanted to. I agreed because I thought it might be what we needed, some time to clear our heads and return with a new perspective. But looking back, I see the cracks now. She had already made up her mind. The space wasn't for us, it was for her. She had already checked out, and I was too blind to realize it. The first day of the break was strange. I stayed in the apartment, alone, as if I was waiting for something. But what? A text? A call? To hear her voice? To hear that she missed me? Nothing came. I went through my usual routine. Wake up, shower, make breakfast, sit at the kitchen table and scroll through my phone, pretending everything was normal. I was supposed to be giving her space, after all, so I didn't text her. I didn't reach out. I wanted to respect her wish, even though I was already starting to feel this deep pit in my stomach. By the second day, I found myself checking my phone every few minutes. It wasn't like her to be this distant. She would usually send little check-in messages, just saying hi, or hope your day's going well. But now, there was nothing. No response to my initial text. No cute little emojis. I didn't want to admit it, but I was already beginning to panic. Something was off, but I didn't know what it was. My mind raced with all sorts of thoughts. Maybe she just needed time to think. Maybe she was overwhelmed, or maybe she was already seeing someone else. On the third day, I finally gave in and texted her. I couldn't help myself anymore. "How's everything going?" I asked. I tried to make it sound casual, like I wasn't desperate for a response, but inside, I was dying to hear from her. It took a few hours before I got a reply. When it came, it wasn't anything like I expected. "I'm fine," she said. "Just taking some time to myself. Don't worry, everything's good. Talk soon." Talk soon. I don't know why, but those two words sent a chill down my spine. They didn't sound reassuring. They didn't sound like someone who missed me. They didn't sound like someone who was eager to fix whatever was going on between us. They sounded like someone who was already starting to pull away completely. By the fourth day, I started noticing strange things. I would find little details. Her favorite jacket, which she always wore when we went out, now sitting on the couch, untouched. Her favorite book, the one we used to talk about for hours, left on the coffee table, gathering dust. She wasn't even pretending to be there. It was as if she was already mentally, emotionally, and physically gone. That's when I began to question everything. How long had she been checked out? How long had I been so wrapped up in my own comfort that I hadn't seen it coming? On the fifth day, I found myself standing in front of the bathroom mirror, staring at my reflection. I didn't recognize the man looking back at me. He looked lost, like he had been through something he wasn't quite ready to face. I thought back to the last few months, the small signs that I had brushed off, the late nights, the distractions, the way she'd stop sharing little things with me, the way she'd pull away physically when I tried to get close. I didn't want to admit it, but deep down, I knew the truth. She was already gone. The final blow came on the sixth day. I didn't expect it. I didn't think it would happen this way. But there it was, sitting in my inbox, from an unknown number. "Can't wait to see you again. This week apart has been good for both of us. See you soon." The message wasn't meant for me. It was meant for someone else. And that was it. That was the moment the wave hit. The realization that Elena wasn't just taking time apart for herself. She was already moving on. This week apart wasn't for us to grow. It was for her to escape. I couldn't stay silent anymore. I knew that now. She had already made her decision. And I was done waiting. It's strange how quickly everything can change when you're not looking. One minute, You're living life like you always have, and the next, you're staring at your phone in disbelief, trying to piece together a puzzle you didn't even know existed. I've always prided myself on being observant, but when it came to Elena, I was blind. The first thing I did after reading that message was call her. My hands were shaking, but I dialed her number anyway. It rang twice before she picked up. Hey. Her voice was calm, almost too calm. It didn't sound like the Elena I knew. Elena, we need to talk, I said, my voice tight with frustration. About what? She asked, and I could almost hear the disinterest in her tone. About the space, about the message. I couldn't hold back anymore. Why are you talking to someone else like that? There was a long pause on the other end, followed by a sigh. It's not what you think, she said. I just needed some time away to figure things out. With him, I couldn't help myself. The words came out sharper than I intended. Yes, she replied, her voice lowering. But it's not what you think. I wasn't happy, and I needed to figure out why. I was silent for a moment, my heart pounding in my chest. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. This wasn't what I signed up for. You've already made your decision, haven't you? I finally asked. I think I have, she admitted softly. But I still care about you, I do. I can't keep pretending. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. This wasn't the Elena I had known. This wasn't the woman I thought I could trust with my life. The call ended shortly after that. There was nothing else to say. I hung up the phone and sat there, stunned. The world felt like it had tilted sideways, and I was left trying to find my footing in a place I didn't recognize. The next few days blurred together. I found myself doing the same things I always did. Eating, sleeping, going through the motions. But everything felt hollow, empty. It was like I was stuck in a loop, replaying that conversation over and over in my head, trying to make sense of her words, of her actions. I wasn't the kind of person who'd let someone walk all over me, but this was different. This wasn't some small fight that could be patched up. This was the end. I had to face it. But even knowing that, I still couldn't bring myself to confront the full truth. She wasn't just emotionally checked out. She had already moved on. I was just the last one to figure it out. Every day that passed, I felt more lost, more confused, more angry. But at the same time, there was a strange sense of relief. I wasn't waiting for her to come back. I wasn't hoping for a miracle. I had finally accepted it. The hardest part was knowing that it didn't matter how much I cared, how much I fought for this relationship. She was done, and nothing I did could change that. The weaker part was supposed to help us, to heal us. But all it did was pull the veil off the truth, and I was left standing there, exposed, with nowhere to go. The truth was undeniable now. Elena and I were over. I didn't need any more signs to see that. But the part of me that had loved her for so long, the part that still wanted to believe in what we once had, kept making excuses. It wasn't until I saw her again, after the week apart, that I finally realized just how far things had gone. It had been almost a week since our last conversation. The days had passed in a blur of disbelief, anger, and confusion. I had tried to keep busy, to distract myself from the obvious. But the knot in my stomach grew tighter with each passing hour. I couldn't escape the feeling that there was more to this, more I wasn't seeing. On the seventh day, Elena reached out to me. It was just a simple text. Can we meet? We need to talk. I should have been prepared for it, but I wasn't. I knew this conversation would change everything. Still, I couldn't back out. Not now. So, I agreed to meet her at the cafe we used to go to when things were good, before everything got so complicated. When I arrived, she was already sitting at a corner table, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee. She looked up when she saw me, her face expressionless, and for a moment, I wondered if she had even thought about this moment before calling me here. I sat down across from her, trying to control the storm of emotions inside me. I guess you know why I asked you to meet, she said, her voice cold but not unkind. Yeah, I replied, forcing myself to speak calmly. I think I do. She sighed and looked down at her coffee, her fingers tracing the rim of the cup. I don't want to hurt you, she said, her eyes briefly meeting mine before quickly looking away. But I think it's time we both accept the truth. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The truth was staring us both in the face. I've been seeing someone else, she continued, her voice low but steady. I didn't plan for it to happen, but it did, and I can't keep pretending like nothing has changed. I felt the breath leave my chest. I had known it. I had suspected it all along, but hearing the words come from her mouth made it real. There was no denying it now. She wasn't just emotionally gone. She was physically involved with someone else. Who is he? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I hadn't intended to ask, but the words slipped out before I could stop them. Her eyes flickered with something like guilt, but she didn't answer right away. Instead, she took a deep breath. His name is Tom, she said finally. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, but it did, and I think it's better if we both move on. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw my coffee cup across the table and demand answers. But I didn't. Instead, I sat there, trying to process the devastation in front of me. How had I not seen this coming? How had I been so blind to what was happening right under my nose? I don't know what to say, I admitted, my voice shaky. She reached across the table, placing her hand over mine, but I pulled away before she could touch me. I'm sorry, she whispered. I never wanted to hurt you. But the thing was, she had already done the damage. The words felt hollow now, meaningless. No amount of apologies could undo what she had already done. You don't have to apologize anymore, I said, my throat tightening. You've already made your choice. There was a long pause, and for a moment, we just sat there, neither of us knowing what to say next. The truth was there, hanging in the air between us. The man she had chosen over me was someone I would never be able to compete with. It wasn't about who he was or what he could offer. It was about the fact that she had already made up her mind. When I finally stood up to leave, I didn't say goodbye. I couldn't. There was nothing left to say. The woman I had loved was gone, and nothing could bring her back. As I walked out of the cafe, I felt something inside me snap. It wasn't sadness or anger. It was something else. It was the feeling of being free, of finally letting go. For the first time in a long time, I could breathe again. But the hardest part? Realizing that the only person left to figure out was me. It's funny how something as small as a text message can change everything. That message, the one she sent after our meeting, was short, but it stuck with me. I hope you'll be okay, it said. No apology. No acknowledgement of the pain she'd caused. Just those 5 words. I didn't reply. What was there to say? She had already made her choice, and I was nothing more than a leftover in her life. I spent the next few days in a haze. I wasn't crying. I wasn't angry. I was numb. It was like my mind had shut down, processing everything in slow motion. The world felt like a dream, out of focus. I went to work, ate, slept, but nothing seemed real. Then, something happened. I checked my phone late one evening, just as I was about to go to bed. A notification popped up. It was her. She had sent me a picture. It was of her and him, smiling at some cafe, looking happy. I stared at the screen for what felt like hours. My hands were shaking, but I couldn't look away. The picture confirmed everything. She had moved on, and she was happy. The question that had been gnawing at me, what if he's the one, was now answered. It stung, more than I had expected, but there was no denying the truth anymore. She was gone, and she wasn't coming back. I should have deleted the picture. It would have been easier, but I didn't. Instead, I kept staring at it, almost as if I was waiting for something. Maybe for her to text me again and say it was all a mistake. Maybe for some glimmer of the woman I used to know to come back. But there was nothing. I deleted the picture the next day, not because it hurt, but because I had to. If I kept holding on, I would never be able to move forward. But moving forward was easier said than done. The days that followed felt like a blur. I couldn't escape the feeling that everything around me was changing, and I was stuck, paralyzed by the weight of my own emotions. I went through the motions: work, sleep, eat, repeat. But inside, there was a constant ache, like something was missing, like I had lost a piece of myself that I couldn't get back. Then came the silence. The kind of silence that speaks louder than any words ever could. Elena stopped texting. She stopped calling. She stopped even pretending that she cared. That was the hardest part. Not the fact that she was with someone else, but that she had completely shut me out of her life. I had spent years with her. I had built my entire world around us, around her, and now she was gone. It was as if I had never mattered to her at all. It wasn't that I wanted her to grovel or beg for forgiveness. I didn't want her to come back. But the silence? That was something I wasn't prepared for. It was a week later when I ran into her. Of all places, it happened at a grocery store. I wasn't looking for her, not really, but I turned a corner and there she was, standing in front of the frozen food aisle, just like it was any other day. She was looking down at a list on her phone, unaware that I was walking right toward her. At first, I thought about turning around, walking the other way, but I couldn't. There was something in the pit of my stomach that urged me to face her, to see her once again, to understand this new reality we had found ourselves in. When she looked up and saw me, her expression froze. There was a brief moment of shock, then a wave of recognition. But no warmth, no smile. She didn't even try to hide the awkwardness. "Hi," I said, my voice strangely steady. "Hi," she replied. Her eyes darted around, avoiding mine. It was almost like she was waiting for me to say something, but I didn't know what. "How are you?" I finally asked. It was a stupid question. I already knew how she was. She was fine. She was living her new life. But I couldn't stop myself. "I'm good," she answered, her voice flat, almost rehearsed. There was an uncomfortable silence, stretching between us like a thick rope. I could feel the weight of all the unspoken words, all the hurt, hovering in the air. It was suffocating. And then, before I could say anything else, she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry," she said, but there was no emotion behind the words. "I didn't want to hurt you, but it's over." I nodded, even though it felt like I had been punched in the gut. I had already known it, but hearing her say it again made it real. She wasn't just gone, she was gone. "Yeah, I figured," I muttered, unable to look her in the eye. Another silence fell between us. This time, it was thick, like we were both trying to figure out how to navigate this strange, new world where we no longer belonged to each other. Finally, she glanced at her watch, as if she couldn't wait to leave. "I have to go," she said quickly. "I'll see you around." Before I could say anything else, she turned and walked away, disappearing down another aisle, leaving me standing there in the middle of the store, trying to breathe through the sharp ache in my chest. I stayed there for a few moments, processing what had just happened. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this encounter was the final confirmation. Elena had moved on. She wasn't coming back, and I needed to stop holding on to something that was already slipping away. The hardest part wasn't seeing her. It wasn't even hearing her voice again. It was realizing that, in the end, she didn't need me. She had found someone else, and she was fine. I was the one who was left behind. I was the one who had to figure out how to move forward. As I walked through the store, pushing my cart, I couldn't stop thinking about what she said. "It's over." Those words, simple as they were, hit harder than anything else. There was no going back now. We were both living in different worlds. And for the first time in a long time, I realized I didn't know who I was without her. But one thing was certain, I had to figure it out. The weeks that followed felt like a strange kind of limbo. I wasn't truly living, but I wasn't exactly giving up either. I was stuck in this in-between space, constantly replaying everything in my head. Was I angry at Elena? Of course. But more than that, I was angry at myself. How had I not seen the signs? Why hadn't I noticed the way she was pulling away long before this all exploded? It was a Thursday evening when I finally decided to confront it. I had spent the past few days avoiding certain places, restaurants, parks, even stores, just because I couldn't bear the thought of running into her again. But that night, I couldn't keep running. I had to face it. I had to stop hiding from the truth. I walked into a local bar, somewhere familiar, somewhere I used to go with friends. The place was quiet, only a handful of people scattered around. I grabbed a drink and sat at the bar, staring into the amber liquid. I needed to think. I needed to understand. As I sipped my drink, my mind wandered back to the conversation Elena and I had in the grocery store. She hadn't looked at me the way she used to. There was no softness in her eyes, no warmth in her touch. She was gone, and in her place was a stranger. But why? Why couldn't she just have been honest with me from the start? Why drag me along, pretending things were fine when all along, she was slipping away into someone else's arms? The question haunted me. The anger, the frustration, it was all starting to boil over, threatening to spill out in ways I wasn't sure I could control. That's when it happened. As I sat there, brooding over my thoughts, I heard a voice behind me. A voice I recognized instantly. "Mind if I join you?" I turned around, startled. It was Tom, the guy Elena had left me for. I froze. For a moment, I didn't know what to do. This was the guy who had taken everything from me, the one who had replaced me without a second thought. And yet, here he was, standing in front of me, asking to join me. "Sure," I muttered, more out of politeness than anything else. He sat down beside me, ordering a drink. There was no awkwardness between us, no tension like I'd expected. He wasn't some rival to be battled. He was just there, Just another man in the same space. For a few moments, we both sat in silence, neither of us knowing what to say. I wanted to ask him so many things, to scream at him for taking her from me, for making her forget everything we had. But I didn't. Instead, he broke the silence. "I know this is weird," he said, his voice calm, almost resigned. "But I just wanted to say, I never meant for any of this to happen." I turned to look at him, surprised. His eyes were sincere, but there was something else there too. Guilt, maybe, or perhaps just a sense of awkwardness that we were both caught in this tangled mess. "It's not your fault," I said, my voice surprising me with how steady it sounded. "You didn't make her leave me. That was all on her." He nodded, seemingly relieved by my response. "I know, but that doesn't make it any easier, does it?" I looked at him for a moment, and I realized something. He wasn't the enemy. Elena wasn't the enemy. The real enemy was the situation we were both trapped in, the mess she had made of our lives. We talked for a while after that. We didn't become friends. We didn't share deep, meaningful conversations. But we talked. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was seeing things more clearly. Elena had made her choice. And now, so had I. I didn't need her. I didn't need the woman who had broken me. I had to start living for myself, not for a version of her that no longer existed. When I left the bar that night, something had changed. I still felt the sting of betrayal, the weight of what had happened. But for the first time in a while, I also felt a strange sense of peace. I wasn't just moving on. I was finally starting to understand that moving on was the only choice left. It's strange how one unexpected moment can shift everything you thought you knew. A few weeks after the encounter with Tom, I found myself standing outside the cafe where Elena and I used to go every Sunday. I wasn't planning on being there. I didn't want to see her or even think about her. But somehow, my feet had taken me there anyway. I stood there for a moment, staring through the glass window. The place was empty, save for the barista behind the counter. The memories flooded back, the laughter, the quiet mornings spent sipping coffee, the way her eyes always lit up when we talked about the future. But that future, the one we'd imagined together, was gone. She had taken it and left me with nothing but a fading picture in my mind. I turned to leave, but then the door opened and I froze. There she was, Elena. She stepped in, glancing around, and spotted me instantly. For a split second, neither of us moved. The world seemed to stop, and it was just us in that space, suspended in time. "Hey," she said, her voice hesitant. "Hey," I replied, my voice tight. I wasn't sure what to do. I wasn't sure what I wanted from her. There was an awkward silence before she spoke again. "I didn't expect to see you here." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to scream, to ask her why she had done this to us, why she had left me in the dust. But I didn't. Instead, I just nodded, stepping aside to let her pass. She hesitated, looking at me as if she was searching for something, some sign that things could go back to how they were. But I wasn't looking for that. Not anymore. "I've been thinking," she started, her voice quieter now. "About what happened. About everything." I felt a knot tighten in my chest. And she took a deep breath, her gaze dropping to the floor. "I'm sorry. I should have been honest with you from the start. I was scared. I didn't know how to tell you." I stared at her, unable to hide the pain in my eyes. She was apologizing now, but it was too late. I didn't need her apologies. What I needed was the woman I thought I knew, the woman who had promised me a future. But that person was gone. "You don't have to apologize," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I get it now. You made your choice." Her eyes filled with something, regret, maybe, but it wasn't enough. Not anymore. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the cafe, the door closing softly behind me. I didn't look back. For the first time in a long time, I felt a strange sense of closure. I wasn't angry. I wasn't devastated. I was free. I had let go. The days after that encounter felt different. Lighter somehow. I didn't feel the weight of Elena's absence dragging me down anymore. It wasn't that I had forgotten her, or that the pain had completely gone away. It was still there, lurking in the background. But it no longer controlled me. I was starting to realize that I didn't need to hold on to something that was no longer meant to be. I threw myself into new projects at work, took up hobbies I had long abandoned, and spent time with friends I had neglected. For the first time in what felt like forever, I started living for myself again. I focused on things that made me happy, things that made me feel whole again. I even took a solo trip to a place I had always wanted to visit. I was changing, evolving. The man who had walked into that cafe a few weeks ago, the one still holding on to the past, was no longer who I was. I met new people, made new connections, and slowly, my heart began to heal. I was no longer looking over my shoulder, waiting for the past to come back. I was moving forward. One evening, a few months later, I found myself sitting at the same cafe where I had run into Elena. This time, though, the chair across from me was empty. It wasn't a place of memories anymore. It was just another place I liked to visit. I smiled to myself as I sipped my coffee, realizing how much I had grown in such a short time. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't angry. I had learned to let go of what wasn't meant for me. And in doing so, I had found the most important thing of all, myself. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine to shape. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control over it again. It wasn't the future I had planned with Elena, but it was one I could still be proud of. I was finally moving forward, and it felt like the beginning of something new. The best part? I knew this was just the start.